The wind howled like a hungry wolf through Harmony Gulch, a place where tumbleweeds outnumbered people and hope was a rarer commodity than gold. Buildings leaned precariously, like tired old men struggling to stand. The saloon doors creaked a mournful tune, and the general store's sign hung askew, missing a crucial "e" that made it read Nero's Store. Dust, the color of rust and despair, coated everything. Harmony Gulch wasn't just struggling, it was on its last legs. The gold mine had dried up years ago, the railroad bypassed it, and most of the townsfolk had packed their meager belongings and headed for greener pastures. What remained were the stubborn, the broke, and those with nowhere else to go. A collection of hard-bitten men mostly, weathered by sun and disappointment, and a handful of equally worn-down women clinging to the hope that things might somehow get better. The problem wasn't just economic, it was social. With so few women, the town had become a breeding ground for squabbles, drunken brawls, and general lawlessness. The nearest sheriff was a day's ride away, and the townsfolk were left to their own devices, which usually meant settling disputes with fists and six-shooters. A meeting was called in the dusty town hall, a rickety structure that threatened to collapse with every gust of wind. The topic, the future of Harmony Gulch, or, more accurately, its lack thereof. "We're dying here, fellas." Old Man Hemlock, the town's self-appointed mayor, wheezed, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into a nearby spittoon. "We need something to hold this place together. Something to give folks a reason to stay." Several ideas were floated, a new mine, a stagecoach stop, even a traveling circus. But none seemed feasible. Then Jebediah, the town's blacksmith, a man of few words but considerable muscle, spoke up. "We need a woman," he grunted, his voice rough as gravel. A murmur rippled through the room. "A woman," Hemlock echoed, scratching his chin. "What good's a woman gonna do?" "A woman can bring order," Jebediah explained, his gaze sweeping over the room. "A home, a school, something besides whiskey and dust." The idea, initially met with skepticism, began to take root. They needed someone to bring a touch of civilization to Harmony Gulch, someone to tame the wildness and give the town a semblance of respectability. But where were they going to find such a woman? And, more importantly, why would she ever agree to come to a place like Harmony Gulch? That was the question that hung heavy in the air, thicker than the dust swirling outside. The question of how to find this woman, and more importantly, convince her to come, hung heavy in the air. "She's waiting for it to be fixed." Old Man Hemlock's eyes narrowed. "And you think she'd be interested in this?" He gestured around the dilapidated town hall. "Don't know," Jebediah admitted. "But she's got a look about her. Strong, like she's seen things. Maybe she's looking for something, too." The townsfolk, desperate as they were, decided to take a chance. A small delegation, led by Hemlock and Jebediah, set out to meet this mysterious woman stranded by the broken stagecoach. They found her sitting on a large rock, calmly reading a book. She was dressed in practical travel clothes, a split riding skirt and a sturdy blouse. But there was a certain elegance about her that even the dust and grime couldn't hide. Her hair, the color of dark honey, was pulled back in a simple braid, and her eyes, when she looked up, were a startling shade of green. "Afternoon," Hemlock said, tipping his hat awkwardly. "I'm Hemlock, mayor of Harmony Gulch. This here's Jebediah." The woman nodded, marking her place in the book with a dried flower. "Sarah," she replied, her voice clear and steady. "Sarah Walker." Hemlock launched into his carefully rehearsed speech, painting a picture of Harmony Gulch that was, well, let's just say it was a very optimistic interpretation of reality. He spoke of the town's potential, its hard-working citizens, and its need for, well, for a woman like her. Then came the proposition. Hemlock, sweating profusely under the desert sun, explained their idea, their desperate, almost ludicrous idea of a community wife. Someone to bring order, teach the children, and generally civilize the town. Sarah listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When Hemlock finally finished, breathless and anxious, she simply raised an eyebrow. "You're offering to pay me to be your wife." "Not exactly wife," Hemlock stammered. more like a community organizer with certain wifely duties. Jebediah winced. He knew it sounded ridiculous. Sarah closed her book, the dried flower falling to the ground. She looked out at the desolate landscape, at the crumbling buildings of Harmony Gulch in the distance. Then, she looked back at Hemlock and Jebediah, her green eyes glinting in the sunlight. "And what," she asked, a hint of a smile playing on her lips, "would be the terms of this arrangement?" Sarah's question hung in the air, thick with the unspoken desperation of Harmony Gulch. Hemlock and Jebediah exchanged nervous glances. They hadn't really thought that far ahead. They were so focused on finding a woman, they hadn't considered the details. "Well," Hemlock began, shuffling his feet, "we were thinking room and board, of course, and a stipend for services." "A stipend," Sarah repeated, her lips twitching slightly. "How much of a stipend are we talking about?" Hemlock named a sum. It was a generous amount considering the town's meager resources, but Sarah didn't flinch. "And what would be expected of me?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. "Besides the wifely duties you mentioned." Hemlock cleared his throat again. "Teach the children to read and write. Help the women with their chores. Organize social gatherings. Just generally make the town a more civilized place." Sarah considered this, her eyes scanning the horizon. The stagecoach, she knew, wouldn't be fixed for at least another day. She could stay here, stranded and vulnerable, or she could take a chance. A big chance. The truth was, Sarah Walker wasn't just passing through. She was running. Running from a past she desperately wanted to escape. A past filled with secrets and danger. She'd hoped to disappear into the vastness of the West, to find a place where she could start over. Harmony Gulch wasn't exactly what she had in mind, but it was an opportunity. An opportunity to reinvent herself, to use her skills and intelligence for something other than survival. She also saw something else in Harmony Gulch, a spark of potential, hidden beneath the layers of dust and despair. These people were rough and uneducated, but they were also resilient and desperate. They were willing to try anything, even something as absurd as hiring a community wife to save their town. And maybe, just maybe, she could help them. And in helping them, she could help herself. "I have certain conditions of my own," Sarah said, her voice firm. Hemlock and Jebediah leaned forward, their faces etched with anticipation. "First," Sarah said, "I will not be performing any wifely duties beyond those I deem appropriate. This is a business arrangement, not a marriage." Hemlock gulped but nodded. "Second," Sarah continued, "I will have complete authority over the school and any other educational programs I establish." "Agreed," Hemlock said quickly. Education was the least of their worries. "And third," Sarah concluded, her eyes narrowing slightly, "I want a say in how this town is run. I want a seat on the town council." This was unexpected. Hemlock and Jebediah exchanged surprised glances. A woman on the town council? It was unheard of, but they were desperate. "All right," Hemlock said, after a moment of hesitation. "You got yourself a deal." Sarah Walker smiled. It wasn't a warm, friendly smile. It was a calculating smile. A smile that said, "You have no idea what you just gotten yourselves into." The agreement sealed, Sarah arrived in Harmony Gulch a few days later, the repaired stagecoach having deposited her and her meager belongings in the center of town. The townsfolk gathered, a motley crew of curious onlookers, their faces a mixture of hope, skepticism, and outright suspicion. The initial reaction was awkward. The men, used to a rough-and-tumble existence, didn't quite know how to act around a proper woman. They shuffled their feet, mumbled greetings, and avoided eye contact. The women, what few there were a little more welcoming, but there was an undercurrent of resentment. Who was this outsider, coming in and telling them how to live? Sarah, however, was unfazed. She had faced far worse in her life. She held her head high, her green eyes scanning the crowd, taking in every detail. She knew she had a lot of work to do. Her first challenge was lodging. The town, in its eagerness to secure her services, had promised her the best accommodations available, which turned out to be a small, dilapidated shack on the edge of town, previously used as a storage shed for the general store. It was dusty, leaky, and infested with rats. But Sarah didn't complain. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She cleaned, scrubbed, and repaired, transforming the shack into a livable, if still humble, dwelling. Next came the wifely duties. The townsfolk, interpreting the agreement literally, expected Sarah to cook, clean, and mend for the entire community. Sarah quickly put a stop to that. She made it clear that she was there to organize, educate, and lead, not to be a glorified maid. She did, however, offer to teach the women new skills: sewing, cooking, and basic hygiene. She showed them how to make soap, how to preserve food, and how to care for their families. Slowly, grudgingly, the women began to accept her. They saw that she wasn't trying to replace them, but to empower them. The children were easier to win over. They were eager to learn, and Sarah, with her patience and enthusiasm, quickly turned the dilapidated town hall into a makeshift schoolhouse. She taught them reading, writing, and arithmetic, but she also taught them about the world beyond Harmony Gulch, about science, art, and history. She opened their minds to new possibilities, giving them hope for a better future. But the biggest challenge was the men. They were stubborn, set in their ways, and resistant to change. They saw Sarah as an outsider, a threat to their way of life. They grumbled about her fancy ideas and her uppity ways. One man, in particular, stood out in his opposition: Caleb, the owner of the saloon. He was a gruff, hard-drinking man who saw Sarah as a threat to his business. He feared that her civilizing influence would drive away his customers and ruin his livelihood. Caleb made it his mission to undermine Sarah at every turn. He spread rumors about her, ridiculed her efforts, and encouraged the other men to ignore her. He was determined to drive her out of Harmony Gulch. But Sarah Walker wasn't easily intimidated. She had faced worse enemies than Caleb, and she wasn't about to back down now. She knew that if she wanted to succeed in Harmony Gulch, she would have to win over the men. And she had a plan. Sarah's plan involved appealing to the men's practical side. She knew that lecturing them about morality or trying to force them to change their ways wouldn't work. She had to show them how her ideas could benefit them directly. She started with the garden. Harmony Gulch relied almost entirely on expensive supplies brought in by stagecoach. Sarah proposed planting a community garden, providing fresh vegetables and herbs for everyone. The men scoffed. "We ain't farmers," Caleb sneered. "We're miners and cowboys." "And you eat, don't you?" Sarah retorted. "Besides, I'm not asking you to become farmers. I'm asking you to help build a garden. It's a skill that could save you money, and maybe even save your lives if the stagecoach stops running." Jebediah, the blacksmith, surprisingly, spoke up in Sarah's defense. "I'll help," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "I know a thing or two about soil." With Jebediah's help, Sarah organized the men. They cleared a patch of land, built fences, and planted seeds. It was hard work, but they started to see the potential. Soon, rows of vegetables began to sprout, a splash of green in the dusty landscape. Next, Sarah tackled the water supply. The town's well was old and unreliable, often running dry during the summer months. Sarah suggested building a system to collect rainwater and store it in barrels. Again, the men were skeptical, but Sarah persisted, explaining the benefits of a reliable water source. She showed them how to build simple filters and how to prevent contamination. Slowly, they came around. With the garden flourishing and the water supply secured, the men began to see Sarah in a new light. They still grumbled about her fancy ideas, but they couldn't deny that she was making a difference. She was bringing stability and prosperity to Harmony Gulch. Even Caleb, the saloon owner, started to soften his stance. He noticed that the men were spending less time drinking and fighting and more time working on the garden and the water system. He also noticed that they were buying less whiskey and more vegetables from the general store. One evening, Caleb approached Sarah as she was leaving the schoolhouse. "All right, Walker," he said, his voice less hostile than usual. "I gotta admit, you've done some good for this town." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment, Caleb?" "Maybe," he grunted. But I still don't trust you. I don't know what you're really up to. Sarah smiled. You'll find out, Caleb. You'll all find out. She turned and walked away, leaving Caleb standing alone in the dusty street, wondering what Sarah Walker's real plan was. He knew, deep down, that it was something bigger than just a garden and a water supply. And he had a feeling that it was going to change Harmony Gulch forever. Jebediah's initial support of Sarah had blossomed into something more. He found himself drawn to her intelligence, her strength, and her unwavering determination. He admired the way she stood up to Caleb, the way she patiently taught the children, and the way she transformed the dusty town hall into a vibrant schoolhouse. He started spending more time with her, helping her with the garden, fixing the leaky roof of the schoolhouse, and even occasionally joining her for a cup of coffee at the general store. They talked about everything, about Harmony Gulch, about their hopes for the future, and even cautiously about their pasts. Jebediah, a man of few words, found himself opening up to Sarah in ways he never had with anyone else. He told her about his wife, who had died years ago from a fever, and about his dreams of building a better life for himself and his children. Sarah, in turn, shared glimpses of her own past, carefully avoiding the details she wanted to keep hidden. She told him about her family, about her travels, and about her desire to make a difference in the world. As they spent more time together, a connection grew between them. It wasn't a passionate, fiery romance, but a slow, steady burn, a quiet understanding, a shared sense of purpose. The other townsfolk noticed the growing connection between Jebediah and Sarah. Some were happy for them, seeing it as a sign of hope for the future. Others were jealous, gossiping behind their backs, and whispering about the community wife and the blacksmith. Caleb, in particular, watched their relationship with a wary eye. He saw Jebediah as a strong, influential figure in the town, and he knew that if Jebediah was fully on Sarah's side, it would be difficult to undermine her. One day, Caleb approached Jebediah as he was working in his blacksmith shop. "So, Jebediah," he said, leaning against the doorframe, "you and the community wife seem to be getting pretty close." Jebediah straightened up, wiping the sweat from his brow. "What's it to you, Caleb?" "Just saying," Caleb replied, a sly grin on his face. "She's a pretty woman, but she's also got secrets. I wouldn't trust her too far." Jebediah's eyes narrowed. "Sarah's done more for this town than you ever have, Caleb, and I trust her with my life." Caleb chuckled. "Suit yourself, Jebediah, but don't say I didn't warn you." Caleb's words planted a seed of doubt in Jebediah's mind. He trusted Sarah, he really did, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. And he knew that if he wanted to protect himself and Harmony Gulch, he needed to find out what it was. He decided he would ask Sarah directly. That evening, as they were walking home from the schoolhouse, Jebediah stopped Sarah. "Sarah," he said, his voice hesitant, "Caleb said something today about you having secrets." Sarah's face paled slightly. She looked away, avoiding his gaze. "Is it true, Sarah?" Jebediah asked gently. "Are you hiding something?" Sarah hesitated for a moment. Then, she took a deep breath and looked back at Jebediah, her green eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Yes, Jebediah," she said softly. "There are things about my past that I haven't told you, things that could put us all in danger." The weight of Sarah's confession hung heavy between them. Jebediah, despite his growing feelings for her, felt a surge of apprehension. He had seen enough trouble in his life, and the thought of Sarah's past bringing danger to Harmony Gulch was unsettling. "What kind of danger, Sarah?" he asked, his voice low. "Who are you running from?" Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting around as if she expected someone to be listening. "I can't tell you everything, Jebediah," she said softly. "Not yet, but I can tell you this. I was involved in something dangerous, something that I had to escape from. I thought I could find peace here in Harmony Gulch, but I was wrong. They're still looking for me." "Who is they?" Jebediah pressed. "Powerful people," Sarah replied, her voice trembling slightly. "People who will stop at nothing to get what they want." Jebediah's mind raced. He thought of the town, of the children, of the fragile peace that Sarah had brought to Harmony Gulch. He couldn't let her past destroy everything they had built. "We have to protect this town, Sarah," he said, his voice firm. We have to protect each other. Sarah looked at Jebediah, her eyes filled with gratitude. I know, she said, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes. From that moment on, Jebediah and Sarah were united in their determination to protect Harmony Gulch from the threat of Sarah's past. They knew they couldn't face it alone. They needed to enlist the help of the other townsfolk. They started by confiding in Hemlock, the town's self-appointed mayor. Hemlock, despite his initial skepticism, had come to respect Sarah and Jebediah. He listened intently as they told him about Sarah's past and the danger it posed to Harmony Gulch. What do you want me to do? Hemlock asked, his face etched with concern. We need your help to prepare the town for an attack, Jebediah said. We need to fortify the buildings, stockpile supplies, and train the men to defend themselves. Hemlock nodded. I'll do whatever I can, he said, but I don't know how many of the townsfolk will be willing to fight. We'll convince them, Sarah said, her voice filled with determination. We'll show them that Harmony Gulch is worth fighting for. Together, Sarah, Jebediah, and Hemlock began to rally the townsfolk. They organized meetings, explained the situation, and appealed to their sense of community. Slowly, hesitantly, the townsfolk began to respond. They saw that Sarah and Jebediah were not just outsiders, but people who cared about their town and were willing to fight for it. Even Caleb, the saloon owner, grudgingly agreed to help. He saw that if Sarah's past came to Harmony Gulch, it would destroy his business and everything he had worked for. He knew that he had to put aside his differences with Sarah and join forces to protect their town. As the townsfolk prepared for the coming storm, a sense of unity began to emerge in Harmony Gulch. They were no longer just a collection of individuals, but a community bound together by their shared desire to protect their home. And Sarah Walker, the community wife with a hidden past, was at the heart of it all, leading them towards an uncertain future. The storm Sarah feared wasn't the one she expected. It wasn't the arrival of the powerful people from her past, at least not yet. Instead, it was a natural disaster that threatened to undo all the progress they had made. A drought descended upon Harmony Gulch, turning the land into a parched and barren wasteland. The garden, once a symbol of hope and prosperity, withered and died. The well, already unreliable, ran completely dry. The rainwater collection system, while helpful, couldn't provide enough water for everyone. Panic gripped the town. The townsfolk, already struggling to survive, faced the prospect of starvation and dehydration. Tempers flared and old grudges resurfaced. Caleb, predictably, blamed Sarah for the drought, accusing her of bringing bad luck to Harmony Gulch. We should have never trusted her, he shouted, his voice fueled by whiskey and despair. She's cursed this town. The other men, desperate and afraid, began to turn against Sarah. They questioned her leadership and demanded that she leave Harmony Gulch. Jebediah, however, stood by her side. He knew that Sarah wasn't to blame for the drought, and he refused to let the townsfolk turn on her. We need to stick together, he said, his voice booming above the crowd. We can't give up now. Sarah has helped us through hard times before, and she can help us through this one too. Sarah, despite the accusations and the hostility, remained calm and focused. She knew that she had to find a way to save Harmony Gulch from the drought. She spent hours studying maps, consulting with Jebediah and Hemlock, and searching for any possible solution. Finally, she came up with an idea. She remembered hearing stories about a hidden spring located high in the mountains that had been used by the Native Americans for centuries. The spring was said to be fed by an underground river and to never run dry, even during the worst droughts. The problem was the spring was located in a dangerous area, known for its treacherous terrain and its hostile wildlife. No one had dared to venture there in years, but Sarah was determined to try. She knew that it was their only hope. I'm going to find that spring, she announced to the townsfolk. I'm going to bring water back to Harmony Gulch. The men scoffed. You're crazy, Walker, Caleb said. You'll never make it. Maybe not, Sarah replied. But I have to try, for the sake of this town. Sarah assembled a small team, including Jebediah, Hemlock, and a few other brave men, and set out for the mountains. The journey was arduous and perilous. They faced steep cliffs, raging rivers, and the constant threat of wild animals. But Sarah refused to give up. She pushed herself and her team to the limit, driven by her determination to save Harmony Gulch. And finally, after days of relentless searching, they found it. The hidden spring. The water was crystal clear and ice cold. It flowed from the mountain like a gift from the gods. Sarah and her team filled their canteens and turned back towards Harmony Gulch, their hearts filled with hope. They had faced a crisis, and they had overcome it. But they knew that their journey was far from over. The drought was just one challenge among many, and Sarah's past was still lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. The return of Sarah and her team, with the life-saving water from the hidden spring, was met with jubilation. Even Caleb, humbled by Sarah's bravery and resourcefulness, offered a sincere apology for his earlier accusations. The drought had tested Harmony Gulch, but it had also strengthened their resolve and solidified their unity. However, the journey to the spring had also revealed something else, something far more significant than a water source. While exploring the area around the spring, Sarah had stumbled upon an old, overgrown trail leading to a hidden cave. Inside the cave, she found more than just bats and dust. She found evidence of an old Native American settlement, including pottery shards, tools, and, most surprisingly, a vein of rich black ore. Sarah, who had studied geology in her youth, recognized the ore immediately. It was vanadium, a rare and valuable mineral used in the production of high-strength steel. In the modern world, it was worth a fortune. Sarah kept her discovery a secret, sharing it only with Jebediah and Hemlock. She knew that if word got out about the vanadium deposit, Harmony Gulch would be overrun by prospectors, land grabbers, and unscrupulous businessmen eager to exploit the resource and destroy the town in the process. This could change everything, Sarah, Jebediah said, his eyes wide with excitement. We could become rich. We could rebuild Harmony Gulch into a thriving city. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, Sarah replied, her voice somber. If we're not careful, this vanadium could be the end of us. Sarah knew that they had to protect the vanadium deposit at all costs. She also knew that they couldn't keep it a secret forever. Eventually, someone would discover it, and Harmony Gulch would be vulnerable. She devised a plan. Instead of allowing outsiders to exploit the vanadium, they would mine it themselves, using the profits to improve the town, build a school, and provide for the future of their children. They would control the resource and use it to create a sustainable and prosperous community. But Sarah also knew that they couldn't do it alone. They needed to find a way to keep the vanadium a secret while they developed a plan for its extraction and use. And they needed to be prepared to defend it from those who would try to take it from them. Sarah's own plan was finally taking shape. It wasn't just about escaping her past or bringing order to Harmony Gulch. It was about creating a better future for the town, a future based on self-reliance, community, and the responsible use of their newfound resource. But it was a plan fraught with danger, and Sarah knew that she would need all her strength, intelligence, and courage to succeed. And she knew that she would need the unwavering support of Jebediah and the other townsfolk who had come to trust and believe in her. The real test of Harmony Gulch was just beginning. Caleb, having witnessed Sarah's resilience and selflessness during the drought, underwent a significant transformation. He realized that his initial distrust and animosity towards her were misplaced. He saw that she genuinely cared about Harmony Gulch and was willing to do whatever it took to protect it. He approached Sarah and Jebediah, offering his full support. "I was wrong about you, Walker," he said, his voice sincere. "I see now that you're not trying to ruin this town. You're trying to save it, and I want to help." Sarah cautiously accepted his offer. She knew that Caleb was a valuable asset. He was a shrewd businessman, a skilled fighter, and a respected figure in the community. With him on their side, they would have a much better chance of protecting the vanadium deposit. Caleb proved to be instrumental in Sarah's plan. He used his connections to acquire mining equipment and supplies without raising suspicion. He organized a security force to guard the mine and keep outsiders away. and he used his saloon as a gathering place to spread misinformation and discourage prospectors from coming to Harmony Gulch. As Caleb and Sarah worked together, their relationship evolved. They learned to trust and respect each other. They discovered that they shared a common goal: to protect Harmony Gulch and create a better future for its residents. Caleb, who had always been a loner, found himself drawn to Sarah's strength and intelligence. He admired her unwavering commitment to her principles and her ability to inspire others. He also felt a growing attraction to her, a feeling that surprised and confused him. Sarah, in turn, appreciated Caleb's loyalty and his willingness to fight for what he believed in. She saw past his gruff exterior and recognized the good heart beneath. She also felt a flicker of attraction towards him, a feeling that she tried to suppress, knowing that her past could put him in danger. However, their growing bond didn't go unnoticed. Jebediah, who had come to see Sarah as more than just a friend, felt a pang of jealousy. He knew that Caleb was a good man, but he couldn't help but feel threatened by his presence. One evening, as Jebediah and Sarah were walking home from a mine, he confronted her about her relationship with Caleb. Are you falling for him, Sarah?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Sarah stopped walking and looked at Jebediah, her eyes filled with sadness. "Jebediah," she said softly, "I care about you deeply. You're one of the best friends I've ever had. But my past, your past doesn't matter to me." Jebediah interrupted. "I know you're a good person, Sarah, and I want to be with you." Sarah hesitated for a moment. Then she took a deep breath and said, "Jebediah, I can't. Not now. My past is too dangerous. I can't risk putting you or anyone else in Harmony Gulch in danger." Jebediah's face fell. He understood what Sarah was saying, but it didn't make it any easier. He knew that he couldn't compete with her past, with the secrets and dangers that haunted her. He knew that he had to accept that their relationship could never be more than just friendship. But it was a difficult pill to swallow. The tensions were rising in Harmony Gulch, and not just from external threats. Despite the romantic complications, Sarah remained focused on her long-term plan for Harmony Gulch. She understood that the vanadium deposit was a double-edged sword. It could bring prosperity, but it could also attract unwanted attention and corruption. She was determined to ensure that Harmony Gulch controlled its own destiny and didn't become another boom-and-bust town, exploited and then abandoned. Her plan involved several key elements. First, they needed to establish a legal claim to the land around the vanadium deposit, preventing outsiders from staking their own claims. Sarah, with her knowledge of law and her persuasive skills, navigated the complex legal process, securing the rights to the land for the town of Harmony Gulch. Second, they needed to develop a sustainable mining operation. Sarah insisted on using environmentally responsible mining techniques, minimizing the impact on the surrounding landscape. She also established a fair labor system, ensuring that the miners were paid a living wage and treated with respect. Third, they needed to diversify the town's economy. Sarah didn't want Harmony Gulch to become solely dependent on vanadium mining. She encouraged the development of other industries, such as farming, ranching, and tourism. She established a cooperative farm, where the townsfolk could pool their resources and share the profits. She also promoted Harmony Gulch as a destination for travelers, highlighting its natural beauty and its unique history. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, she invested in education. She expanded the school, hiring more teachers and offering a wider range of subjects. She also established a vocational training program, teaching the townsfolk valuable skills that would help them succeed in the modern world. Sarah's plan was ambitious, but it was working. Harmony Gulch was transforming from a dying town into a thriving community. The vanadium mine was providing a steady income, and the other industries were beginning to flourish. The school was producing bright and talented students, and the town was attracting new residents. However, Sarah knew that their success wouldn't go unnoticed forever. Sooner or later, someone would discover the vanadium deposit, and Harmony Gulch would face a new set of challenges. One day, a stranger rode into town. He was a well-dressed man, with a smooth-talking demeanor and a glint of greed in his eyes. He introduced himself as Mr. Sterling, a representative of a powerful mining company. "I've heard rumors about a vanadium deposit in this area," Sterling said to Sarah, his eyes scanning the town. "I'm here to make you an offer. My company is willing to pay a handsome sum for the rights to mine that vanadium." Sarah smiled. "Thank you for your offer, Mr. Sterling," she said. "But we're not interested in selling." Sterling's face hardened. "You don't understand," he said. "My company is very powerful. We always get what we want. You can either sell us the rights to the vanadium, or we can make things very difficult for you." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "I think you'll find that Harmony Gulch is not as easy to intimidate as you think," she said. "We're a community of strong and determined people, and we're not afraid to fight for what's ours." Sterling chuckled. "We'll see about that," he said. "We'll see just how strong and determined you really are." And with that, he turned and rode out of town, leaving Sarah with a sense of foreboding. The storm she had been dreading was finally approaching. Sterling's threat was not an empty one. Within days, Harmony Gulch began to experience a series of escalating problems. The stagecoach stopped running, cutting off their supply lines. Cattle were stolen from the cooperative farm, crippling their food production. And a group of rough-looking men began hanging around the saloon, intimidating the townsfolk and spreading rumors about Sarah's past. It was clear that Sterling's company was trying to force Harmony Gulch to sell the vanadium rights by making life as difficult as possible. Sarah, Jebediah, and Caleb knew that they had to act quickly. They organized a town meeting, where they laid out the situation and asked for the townsfolk's support. "We're facing a powerful enemy," Sarah said, her voice strong and resolute. "They're trying to take what's ours, but we can't let them. We have to stand together and fight for our town." The townsfolk, remembering the drought and Sarah's leadership, rallied to her side. They formed a militia, armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find, and prepared to defend Harmony Gulch. Caleb, with his knowledge of fighting and his connections to the underworld, took charge of the defense. He organized patrols, set up barricades, and trained the militia in combat tactics. Jebediah, with his skills as a blacksmith, crafted weapons and repaired the town's defenses. He also used his knowledge of the terrain to create traps and ambushes for the enemy. Sarah, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to keep the townsfolk's spirits up. She organized community meals, led sing-alongs, and reminded everyone what they were fighting for. She also sent a message to an old friend from her past, a former lawman, asking for his help. The showdown came one cold, moonless night. Sterling's men, a group of hardened mercenaries, launched an all-out assault on Harmony Gulch. They stormed into town, firing their guns and setting buildings ablaze. The townsfolk, however, were ready for them. They fought back fiercely, using every weapon and tactic at their disposal. Caleb led the charge, his saloon becoming a fortress, pouring whiskey and buckshot onto the attackers. Jebediah's traps caught several mercenaries by surprise, and the townsfolk, fighting from behind barricades and rooftops, rained down a hail of bullets on the enemy. Sarah, armed with a rifle, fought alongside the men, her green eyes blazing with determination. She moved through the chaos, inspiring the townsfolk and taking down mercenaries with deadly accuracy. The battle raged for hours, the fate of Harmony Gulch hanging in the balance. Just when it seemed like the townsfolk were about to be overwhelmed, a group of riders appeared on the horizon. It was Sarah's old friend, the former lawman, leading a posse of deputies. The deputies charged into the battle, tipping the scales in favor of Harmony Gulch. Sterling's men, outnumbered and outgunned, were forced to retreat. The battle was over. Harmony Gulch had survived, but the victory had come at a cost. Several townsfolk had been wounded, and some had been killed. The town was scarred and battered, but it was still standing, and it was still free. The aftermath of the battle was a time of mourning and rebuilding. The townsfolk buried their dead, tended to the wounded, and repaired the damage to their homes. But amidst the sorrow and the hardship, there was also a sense of pride and accomplishment. They had faced a powerful enemy, and they had prevailed. The battle had proven that Sarah's leadership had transformed Harmony Gulch. The once divided and struggling town had become a united and resilient community. The garden, the school, the sustainable mining operation, all of these things had contributed to their strength and their ability to withstand the attack. Sarah, who had arrived in Harmony Gulch as a stranger, fleeing from her past, had become a true leader, a symbol of hope and inspiration. The community wife, as she had been initially known, had become something much more, a protector, a visionary, and a friend. The townsfolk looked to her for guidance, for comfort, and for reassurance. They knew that she would always put their interests first and that she would never give up on them. Even Jebediah and Caleb, who had both harbored romantic feelings for Sarah, put aside their differences and worked together to support her. They realized that their love for Sarah was secondary to their love for Harmony Gulch and their commitment to its future. The former lawman, impressed by the courage and resilience of the townsfolk, offered to stay in Harmony Gulch and help them rebuild. He agreed to become the town sheriff, ensuring that law and order were maintained and that Sterling's company didn't try to retaliate. With the threat of Sterling's company removed, Harmony Gulch began to thrive. The vanadium mine continued to produce a steady income, and the other industries flourished. The school expanded, attracting students from neighboring towns, and Harmony Gulch became known throughout the region as a model of self-reliance, community, and sustainable development. Sarah, however, knew that her past would eventually catch up with her. She had received a message from her old friend, the lawman, informing her that Sterling's company had connections to a powerful criminal organization, one that was known for its ruthlessness and its long reach. She knew that it was only a matter of time before they came looking for her, and she knew that when they did, they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Sarah decided that she couldn't stay in Harmony Gulch any longer. She couldn't risk putting the townsfolk in danger. She had to leave to protect them from her past. She gathered Jebediah and Caleb and told them her decision. They were both heartbroken, but they understood. They knew that Sarah was doing what she thought was best for Harmony Gulch. "I'll never forget you," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "You've given me a home, a purpose, and a reason to believe in myself again. I'll always be grateful for that." Jebediah and Caleb embraced Sarah, promising to never forget her. They knew that they would always carry her memory in their hearts. Sarah prepared to leave Harmony Gulch, knowing that she was leaving behind the only place where she had ever truly felt at home. But she also knew that she was leaving behind a legacy of strength, resilience, and community. And she knew that Harmony Gulch would continue to thrive, even without her. The morning Sarah was to leave, the entire town gathered to say goodbye. Even those who had initially doubted her, like some of the grumpiest old miners, stood respectfully, hats in hand. The children she had taught presented her with a bouquet of wildflowers, their faces streaked with tears. As she prepared to mount her horse, Jebediah stepped forward. He held out a small, intricately carved wooden box. "For you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "To remember us by." Sarah took the box, her fingers tracing the delicate carvings. Inside, she found a small piece of vanadium ore polished to a shine. "Thank you, Jebediah," she whispered. Then Caleb stepped forward. He hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver locket. "I know you said you couldn't," he began, "but I want you to have this. So you know someone's waiting for you, if you ever decide to come back." Sarah took the locket, her heart swelling with emotion. She opened it and saw a tiny photograph of Caleb, his gruff face softened by a rare smile. "Thank you, Caleb," she said, her voice trembling. As Sarah looked at the faces of the townsfolk, she realized that she couldn't leave. She couldn't abandon these people, who had come to depend on her, who had welcomed her into their community, who had given her a second chance. She knew that her past was still a threat, but she also knew that she wasn't alone. She had Jebediah, Caleb, and the entire town of Harmony Gulch to stand by her side. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and made her decision. "I can't go," she announced, her voice ringing with conviction. "I can't leave you. This is my home now, and I'm not going to let my past destroy it." A cheer erupted from the crowd. The townsfolk surged forward, surrounding Sarah with hugs and words of encouragement. Jebediah and Caleb exchanged a look of relief and joy. They knew that Sarah's decision meant that their lives would be more complicated, more dangerous. But they also knew that they wouldn't have it any other way. Sarah dismounted her horse and turned to face the town. "We still have a fight ahead of us," she said, her eyes blazing with determination. "Sterling's company won't give up easily, and my past is still out there, waiting for me. But we'll face it together. We'll protect our town, our community, and our future." The townsfolk roared their approval. They were ready to fight, to defend Harmony Gulch to the very end. And they knew that with Sarah by their side, they could overcome any obstacle. The next morning, Sarah gathered Jebediah, Caleb, and the other town leaders and laid out a new plan. They would devise a new strategy to deal with Sterling's company and her past, one that would protect Harmony Gulch and allow her to finally find peace. They decided to take the fight to Sterling, exposing his company's illegal activities and bringing him to justice. Sarah, with the help of her lawman friend, gathered evidence of Sterling's crimes, including bribery, intimidation, and violence. She then traveled to the nearest city and presented the evidence to the authorities, who launched an investigation into Sterling's company. Faced with the threat of prosecution, Sterling was forced to abandon his plans for Harmony Gulch. He was arrested and charged with multiple crimes, and his company was eventually shut down. With Sterling out of the picture, Sarah turned her attention to her past. She knew that Silas and his organization would never give up on her, and she couldn't continue to live in fear. She decided to confront them head-on. She gathered Jebediah, Caleb, and a group of trusted townsfolk and traveled to Silas's headquarters, a remote ranch in the desert. A final, decisive battle took place, with Sarah and her allies facing off against Silas and his henchmen. The battle was fierce and brutal, but in the end, Sarah and her friends prevailed. Silas was defeated and brought to justice, and his organization was dismantled. With her past finally resolved, Sarah returned to Harmony Gulch, a free woman. She had faced her demons and emerged victorious. She had protected her town, her community, and her future. Harmony Gulch continued to thrive, becoming a shining example of what could be achieved when people work together for a common goal. The town was no longer just surviving, it was thriving. It was a place of hope, opportunity, and community. Sarah, who had once been a fugitive, running from her past, had finally found peace and happiness. She remained in Harmony Gulch, surrounded by the people she loved, living a long and fulfilling life. She never forgot the lessons she had learned, the challenges she had overcome, and the importance of community. And she continued to inspire others with her strength, her courage, and her unwavering commitment to justice. The story of Sarah Walker, the community wife who saved Harmony Gulch, became a legend, passed down through generations. It was a story about the power of hope, the importance of community, and the transformative impact of one extraordinary woman. And it was a reminder that even in the wildest of places, anything is possible. The end.